It was his first time driving with his younger brother, but they ended up in a serious car accident. When the mother rushed to the scene after receiving the news, she was shocked to see her younger son covered in blood yet completely unharmed, something that even puzzled the traffic police. Airbags can deploy at speeds of up to 200 kilometers per hour, and children in such accidents usually suffer broken bones, fractured necks, or even lose their lives. But her son seemed as if nothing had happened, until the foster mother noticed the injury on his arm and understood everything. In that split second when the airbag exploded, he had shielded his brother with his own arm. This kind-hearted young man, however, often found himself left out. When the foster parents took a family photo, he could only sit alone off to the side, watching quietly. Sensing his loneliness, the foster mother ignored the family's objections and called him over to join. He squeezed in at the back, and with a click of the camera shutter, he felt the warmth of family for the very first time. That moment also marked the turning point of his fate, because just days earlier, Michael had been homeless and wandering from place to place, surviving on leftover popcorn he picked up at stadiums. He carried a plastic bag everywhere, holding the only spare set of clothes he owned, and at night he would sneak into laundromats to stay warm. That evening, as he walked alone down the road in a short-sleeved shirt, shivering in the freezing night, fate intervened. The Tuohy family happened to pass by, and their younger son recognized him as Big Mike, a student at his school. Curious, Leigh Anne Tuohy wondered why he was dressed so lightly in such cold weather. Her husband pulled over and asked where he was going. Michael said he was heading to the gym, but since it wasn't on their route, they drove off. Moments later, realizing something wasn't right, Leigh Anne insisted they turn around, knowing the gym would have been closed at that hour. When she pressed him on why he was going there, Michael simply replied that it was warm at night. She then asked if he had anywhere to sleep, and though he nodded faintly at first, under her sharp gaze he quietly shook his head. Realizing he had nowhere to go, Leigh Anne turned to her husband, who instantly understood her intention. And so, that night, Michael got into their car and went home with them. The moment he arrived outside the villa, his eyes widened, for he had never seen such a grand and luxurious house before. Just like in every previous foster home, Mike was again arranged to sleep on the sofa in the living room. Tuohy carefully laid out the sheets for him before heading upstairs. Once back in her room, Tuohy suddenly felt a twinge of regret. They knew nothing about Mike, and if something were stolen, it would be troublesome. Her husband calmly reassured her, saying they would know the truth by morning. The next day, Tuohy went downstairs nervously and was stunned by what she saw. Not only was the blanket folded neatly, but nothing in the room was missing, and Mike had already left. Ashamed of her doubts, Tuohy hurried outside and stopped him just as he was about to leave. When she learned he had nowhere to go, she invited him to stay and spend Thanksgiving with them. When the feast was ready, the family rushed to the table with excitement, but Mike cautiously and timidly approached. His sister casually handed him a plate, and while everyone else piled food onto theirs, Mike only took some fried rice and vegetables. Then, when no one was looking, he slipped a piece of bread into his pocket, afraid that eating too much might cause the family to dislike him. As the others lounged on the sofa watching TV and enjoying the meal, Mike sat alone at the table nibbling on the dry bread. Seeing how considerate he was, Tuohy felt a pang in her heart. She picked up the remote and turned off the TV, then brought all the food back to the table, saying that holidays should be celebrated properly. At her urging, the family joined hands for a prayer before the meal. His sister reached out to Mike without hesitation, and only after his younger brother reminded him did Mike dare to extend his hand. In this way, with Tuohy's family by his side, Mike experienced the first Thanksgiving of his life. After the meal, Tuohy planned to take him to buy some winter clothes, but Mike insisted he already had enough. Tuohy knew well that the only thing he carried was a t-shirt in his bag, so she pulled the car over, determined to learn more about him. "Who usually takes care of you? Who do you live with?" she asked. Mike stayed silent, saying nothing. Patiently, Tuohy pressed on, "You have to tell me at least one thing." In a low voice, Mike finally said, "I don't like being called Big Mike, because it actually means dumb giant." Hearing this, Tuohy gently agreed. They then drove to the neighborhood to collect Mike's clothes. As Tuohy was about to get out of the car, Mike quickly pulled the door shut, locked it, and told her to stay inside, knowing well how chaotic and dangerous the area was. He stepped out, greeted some local troublemakers, and then walked home to fetch his clothes. But when he reached the door, he froze. A government eviction notice was posted there. It was clear that his mother had once again been forced out, and no one knew where she had gone. Mike hid by the corner wall, quietly grieving for a while. Seeing him return empty-handed, Tuohy instantly understood everything. She didn't say a word, but instead took him straight to the store to buy clothes. Walking down the street, Tuohy felt uneasy, since she had never been to such a place before, but Mike calmly reassured her, saying, "Don't worry, I'm here." Feeling comforted, Tuohy gently held onto his arm. When they entered a clothing store, Tuohy picked out expensive new items, but the thoughtful Mike simply shook his head and said he didn't like them, finally choosing only a discounted clearance item. That evening, Tuohy asked Mike if he wanted to stay with them long-term. Mike replied, "I don't want to go anywhere else anymore." Hearing this, Tuohy felt deeply relieved. The next day, she not only cleared out a large room for him but also bought a bed tall enough to fit his height. Mike could hardly believe his eyes. He asked, "Is this really for me?" Tuohy thought he meant the private room, but what Mike was referring to was the bed, because in his entire life, he had never slept in one. Hearing this, Tuohy was instantly choked with emotion. She forced herself to stay calm and left the room, but once next door, she couldn't stop her tears. She could hardly imagine what Mike's childhood had been like. At that moment, she made a decision to officially adopt Mike and give him a real, warm home. When the socialites heard that she intended to adopt a young black boy, they all burst into laughter. They mocked, saying her family's dining table probably wouldn't even have enough food for him, and warned her to be careful with her beautiful daughter, implying, "Aren't you worried he might do something inappropriate?" Tuohy, with a stern expression, warned them, "Let me make it clear, I'm not asking for your opinion." Ultimately, the gathering ended on a sour note. Though she outwardly appeared unaffected, Tuohy felt a flicker of concern in her heart. That evening, her husband asked their daughter if she had any objections to adopting Mike. On the surface, she said she would respect her mother's decision, but her face clearly showed displeasure. However, when she saw Mike pushing two children on the swings and the joy on their faces, her attitude toward him instantly changed. At the library, when such a large boy walked in, other students immediately stared. To avoid causing trouble for his sister, Mike sat alone in an empty corner. Ignoring her friends' glances, his sister took her books and sat with him, saying, "Don't look at me like that, just think of it as doing homework at home." Mike felt a warmth from her words. Gradually, the whole family began to accept Mike's presence. At the library, they would huddle together like a real family, reading, talking, and laughing. When Tuohy learned that Mike had never heard bedtime stories, she patiently read to him like a child, and Mike, like a real child, lay beside her quietly listening, as if making up for the lost time of his childhood. Even his father changed Mike's school emergency contact to himself. When reviewing Mike's school records, Tuohy discovered that although he was 2 meters tall, his IQ was only 80, comparable to a 6-year-old. Yet one test showed an extraordinary strength, his protective instinct. The reason Mike was able to enter this predominantly white school was thanks to the rugby coach, who recognized that despite Mike's tall, broad frame, his body was unusually agile. Whether it was dribbling past opponents or leaping for a layup, Mike could execute everything flawlessly, which made the coach feel as if he had discovered a treasure. In football, the most crucial position is the quarterback, and protecting the quarterback is primarily the responsibility of the left guard. Because football often relies on sheer physical collisions, the left guard must meet very high physical requirements. A large frame, thick and strong thighs, long arms, big hands and feet, and agile movements. Mike happened to meet all of these conditions perfectly. Although his IQ was low and his academic performance poor, the physical education teacher insisted on keeping him on the team despite objections. However, while Mike had many physical advantages, his natural protective instinct became a disadvantage in football. Kind-hearted by nature, he was reluctant to collide with others. During training, he would either lift and throw an opponent directly or carry a teammate so the teammate could run, which, while effective, was considered a foul. Another challenge was that having never played football before, Mike could not grasp the rules and techniques. The coach frankly admitted that if Mike could fully realize his potential, he could go to college and become a star, but if he continued as he was, even graduating would be difficult. To help Mike quickly grasp the essentials, his younger brother designed a detailed training program. Fortunately, Mike was very willing to follow his brother's instructions, from basic sit-ups to shuttle runs on the field, from running with his brother carrying weights to using his brother as a barbell, and even using various seasoning bottles at home as teammates to practice tactics. After a period of grueling training, Mike made significant progress. One day, he approached Tuohy with a request. He wanted to get a driver's license. Tuohy was initially puzzled, asking why he needed a license when he didn't even have a car. When she learned he simply wanted an official form of identification, she was shocked. She took Mike to check all available records, only to find that he had no legal identification whatsoever. At that moment, Tuohy made another decision. Although Mike was about to turn 18 and legal adoption would no longer hold much significance, she resolved to secure his legal status through proper legal channels. The next day, Tuohy arrived early at the adoption center, where she learned even more about Mike's past. From birth, he had never seen his father, and his mother, a drug addict who had given birth to over 10 children, had been neglectful and indifferent toward him. Mike grew up moving through more than 10 foster homes, and in each one he could only sleep on the living room sofa. Because of his large size and appetite, foster families would soon regret taking him in. Whenever he heard his foster parents arguing because of his presence, Mike knew it was time to leave again. This unfortunate childhood shaped his quiet and reserved personality. The staff informed Tuohy that Mike's guardianship currently belonged to the government, and if she wanted to adopt him, all she needed was to sign a document. His mother's consent was not required. Still, out of respect for Mike's mother, Tuohy insisted on visiting her in the community. Only when she saw that Tuohy was genuinely kind and wanted to adopt her son did Mike's mother feel reassured enough to let her into the house. She warned Tuohy to be careful, saying he might leave without notice. She knew that, due to her long-term drug use and poor health, no matter which foster home he was placed in or where she moved, Mike would always find a way back to care for her. At this point, Mike's mother became emotional, and Tuohy quickly comforted her, telling her she would always be Mike's mother and could see him anytime she wanted. However, Mike's mother refused, not wanting her son to see her in a degraded state. This only strengthened Tuohy's resolve to adopt Mike. Back at home, they held a family meeting to ask Mike if he wanted to become part of their family. Seeing the certain encouraging looks from his sister and brother, Mike said, "I feel like I already am." Shortly after, he not only received his first legal identity but was also gifted an impressive pickup truck by his foster parents. Excited with his new vehicle, Mike took his brother for a ride, and the two sang and danced joyfully in the car, completely forgetting to watch the road ahead. This led to the opening scene. Seeing her son covered in blood yet seemingly unharmed, Tuohy was puzzled, until she noticed the scratches covering Mike's arms and realized it wasn't a miracle. Mike had reacted quickly enough to shield himself, using his arms to absorb most of the impact from the airbag, which ultimately prevented a tragedy. Seeing how fiercely Mike was willing to protect his family, Tuohy suddenly had an idea when she noticed that Mike hesitated to go on the offensive during football practice and the coach didn't know how to handle it. She quickly walked into the training line and said, "This team is your family. You need to protect them and stop everyone else. Treat the quarterback as me, the little guy as your brother, and your sister and dad are also in the crowd. You have to make sure no one gets hurt." Mike finally understood what Tuohy meant, though his teammates looked puzzled. From that moment, Mike transformed into a ferocious beast on the field, using his massive body to block opponents and his quick steps to prevent anyone from breaking through the defense. Soon, Mike faced his first official football game. Nervous in front of so many spectators, he hesitated, giving the opposing player number 66 an opening to intercept the quarterback. Number 66's father in the stands shouted constantly, while Mike's younger brother looked upset, but his mother told him not to mind. After another interception, number 66 became even more arrogant, insulting Mike as a useless big oaf and threatening to take him out that evening. Number 66 continued to use fake moves to confuse Mike, allowing his team to score repeatedly. The father grew increasingly aggressive in the stands, and even Tuohy, watching from below, couldn't tolerate it anymore. She turned and scolded him harshly. As the score gap widened, Mike accidentally fell during another interception attempt, and number 66 not only cursed him as an idiot but also kicked him in the head, angering the coach. The coach tried to argue with the referee but was handed a yellow card, which made him even more furious. "This kid is fighting for my team," the coach shouted, growing more emotional. "I'll protect him like my own child." He was about to confront the referee further, but Mike, who had seen everything, stopped him and said, "Coach, don't worry." At that moment, he remembered what Tuohy had once said, to protect every teammate as if they were family. The dormant beast within him was awakened once more. As the game began, Mike charged forward, grabbed number 66, and shoved him relentlessly ahead. The coach shouted encouragement nonstop, and the spectators stood in amazement. They had never seen such a fierce player. Even after his team scored a touchdown, Mike didn't let go. Instead, he hurled number 66 out of bounds, causing him to take a hard fall. Tuohy couldn't contain herself and shouted, "Do you see number 74? That's my son." From that point, Mike became unstoppable, effortlessly evading opponent tackles. After several consecutive collisions, number 66 limped off the field and sat obediently on the sideline to rest. Unsurprisingly, their team claimed the final victory. Mike's younger brother recorded all the thrilling moments and burned the footage onto a DVD to send to the recruitment offices of various colleges. Even seasoned college coaches, seeing Mike's raw power, couldn't help but marvel. He was undeniably a natural-born football player. The very next morning, numerous coaches, including multiple Super Bowl-winning head coaches, rushed to Mike's school. Still skeptical of the footage, the coaches asked Mike to demonstrate in person. Seeing him instantly take down a teammate of similar size left the coaches wide-eyed in shock, and they quickly pulled out their phones. One coach declared, "As long as his grades qualify, I'm taking him." Back at home, Tuohy began reviewing Mike's academic record, which had been pitifully low in previous years. To meet eligibility requirements, he would need straight A's in his final year. Her husband felt it was too rushed and suggested that even attending a junior college would suffice. However, by this time, they had already received over 50 university offers. Determined not to miss such a golden opportunity, Tuohy brought in a professor from the University of Mississippi to tutor Mike. The professor proved exceptional, explaining complex concepts in simple, engaging ways and greatly boosting Mike's interest in learning. In his last year of high school, Mike became thoroughly busy, balancing intensive tutoring with his regular football training and matches. To get ahead of the competition, coaches began visiting Mike's home, each offering increasingly generous incentives, all hoping that he would choose their school in the future. Coaches came and went nonstop, and throughout the process, Mike's younger brother acted like his manager, confidently negotiating and vetting the offers for his brother. By the end of his final high school year, Mike had not only achieved outstanding grades but also led the school team to a football championship. After a series of discussions and careful considerations, Mike ultimately chose the University of Mississippi. Just as the family was dreaming about a bright future, officials from the College Athletic Association showed up, suspecting that Tuohy's family had orchestrated everything from the start. Because both Tuohy and her husband were alumni and donors of the University of Mississippi, the association suspected they had adopted Mike primarily for his football talent, and once he achieved the grades, they pushed him straight into their school. Their words planted doubt in Mike's mind. Nervously rubbing his legs with his hands, he wondered if Tuohy's family's affection for him had all been an act. The more he thought about it, the more uneasy he felt. Seeing Tuohy again, he vented his frustration. "So all of this was your scheme? If it weren't for the association, I'd still be in the dark." With that, he angrily turned and walked away, leaving a bewildered Tuohy behind. Tuohy herself began to question whether they had overplanned for Mike, since they had never truly known his inner thoughts. Her husband reassured her, "All we need to do is act with a clear conscience. The rest is up to Mike to decide for himself." On the other side of town, Mike, who hadn't gone home, returned to the neighborhood. His former friends saw him and dragged him into a bar. Listening to their foul-mouthed insults, Mike wanted to leave, but they started making jokes about his adoptive mother and sister. This enraged Mike beyond measure. Ignoring the gun one of them held, he shoved the man to the ground. Before long, he had taught all the thugs a lesson. It was only then that he realized he had long considered Tuohy's family as his own. Until dawn the next day, Tuohy, disregarding the danger, drove through the neighborhood searching for Mike. She even went to the places he had visited the night before, asking the thugs if he had been there. The battered thugs began speaking rudely to Tuohy, but she could no longer tolerate it. She turned and warned the arrogant thug, "If you step into the city, I promise you won't get away with it. I'm a member of the National Rifle Association, and I carry a gun at all times." As she skillfully patted the small bag on her shoulder, the thugs, seeing this, dared not act arrogantly any longer. Just as Tuohy returned to her car, Mike called. It was the first time he had ever called her mom. Tuohy found Mike at a laundromat, and they sat down for a long talk. She wanted to know how he, born in the slums, had managed to remain kind-hearted and not go with the flow. Mike said that when he was a child, whenever something bad happened, his mother would make him close his eyes. She tried to shield him from seeing drugs or other harmful things, only letting him open his eyes after the danger had passed. She made him always believe that the world was a good place, that the past was behind him, and that everything would turn out fine. Tuohy said that from the start, she had never asked whether he liked playing football. Mike replied that he was quite good at it. Tuohy added that if he chose Tennessee, she and her father would cheer for him, attending every game. No matter which school he chose, or even if he decided to become a street thug instead of playing football, she would be happy for him. Everything was up to him because it was his life. Hearing this, Mike smiled from the heart. He already knew which school he wanted to choose. The next day, he went to the Athletic Association and explained why he chose the University of Mississippi, because that's where my family went to school. My mom and dad were there, so I want to be there too. The association staff smiled approvingly, knowing this was truly what Mike felt in his heart. Soon it was the first day of school, but his mom wore a serious expression. Just like any mother sending her child off, her heart was full of joy yet heavy with reluctance. After giving Mike her advice, she got into the car without looking back. Mike seemed to understand something. He walked up and gently tapped on the car window, saying he wanted a proper hug. When Tuohy turned around, she realized she had been secretly crying in the car. She then happily stepped out and gave Mike a big, warm embrace. The Blind Side, directed by John Lee Hancock and starring Quentin Aaron and Sandra Bullock, was released in 2009 and is a sports biographical film based on true events. The character of Mike is based on the renowned American football player Michael Oher, who went on to win the 47th Super Bowl in 2013 with the Baltimore Ravens. His life story is deeply inspirational. While the film may seem dramatized, it is entirely rooted in reality. Mrs. Tuohy appears strong-willed but is warm and caring at heart. She always listens attentively to Mike, offering genuine respect rather than condescending charity. Her care for Mike is shared by her entire family. Her husband supports him unconditionally, her daughter readily lends a helping hand, and her youngest son warms Mike's heart with his innocent smile. The family as a whole demonstrates rare kindness, providing a stranger child with unconditional love and acceptance. Mike's fortune in life stems from encountering such a family, enabling him to move from a shadowed past toward a life filled with light and opportunity.